Hi, I'm Wiley Wiggins. I'm 36 years old. I've lived here my whole life. I was born here, so the weather's always been bad, except for about a week in the fall and a week in the spring.
Yeah, it's always been as bad as it is now.
No, I think it's definitely with like the drought and the heat. It seems like it's getting progressively worse. But every August I say that I'm gonna leave, and then summer ends, and I'm like, oh, everything's fine. I like Austin. I don't want to leave. And then summer rolls around again, and everybody starts cursing. Yeah, I've lived other places as an adult. I lived in San Jose for a while, which was truly awful. I lived in LA for a while. That was pretty awful. I lived in New York. That was great. And then they started dropping airplanes on it, and that was pretty awful. So
you were there then?
Yeah. Well, the day that it happened, I was in Toronto for the Toronto Film Festival. Actually, the day that it happened, we were going to show, it was going to be the premiere of Waking Life, the animated movie I did like a year before, and the day we were going to show it, that happened, so we just kind of were like, fuck it, went home. So I went back to New York the next day, and it was pretty scary. So then I ended up moving back home to Austin. I've been here ever since. Why was LA bad? I don't know, I went out there, I didn't drive until this year. Which is, you really can't. Yeah, I started driving this year.
You just never did it?
36, no, I was just never a driver. So yeah, it's bad to live in LA when you don't drive.
Oh yeah.
I went out there because this guy that was in Dazed and Confused with me, who had like kind of turned into this like sort of hotshot kind of character actor-y guy, was like, yeah, come out here and like I'll hook you up with my agent, you can go out on some auditions, which is something that was always super repellent to me. So I went out there, and he ended up being kind of crazy, and I was staying with him, and I had to leave, and I had to get a place to live in about a week. So I got an apartment on what was then a really bad area of town, Rampart in Wilshire. It was like kind of near between Koreatown and downtown. It's like fine now, but then it was pretty sketchy. Rampart was like where the biggest police scandal in like U.S. history happened. So I was living there. My landlord took my deposit check and took the account number off of it and did theft by check by phone for like $800. And I was broke and I didn't have a job and I wasn't driving. Yeah, and then he left the country. I had to like file a police report, but at that point like all these checks had bounced. And I couldn't find work, so I do like some post-production stuff. But the only job I could find doing like post stuff was for HBO soft porn in Encino. So I was taking like public transportation in LA from downtown to Encino every day to work to do like title animation for soft porn. I can at least say that I tried now, so I have no regrets. No, Dazed and Confused was a real slow burn. Like it did really poorly in the theaters because they didn't release it in any theaters. The studio was Universal, had this like puppet company. Like now they've got these sort of like indie houses, like like there was like Warner Independent and all these like Fox Searchlight or whatever. Back then they didn't really have stuff like that, but Universal had this company called Gramercy. And they kind of second guessed the movie the whole way through. They didn't want it to have period music. They wanted the director to use a bunch of 70s sounding guitar licks from a band called Jackal.
Jackal.
Yeah, they wanted boobs in the movie, which was kind of not cool because Dazed was weird in that like it actually had kids that were playing the ages they were supposed to be instead of like 30-year-old like grizzled Hollywood people with a bunch of plastic surgery playing 18-year-olds. they wanted all this stuff to happen, and then when it didn't kind of meet their specifications, they were like, well, screw this, we'll kind of bury it. And then it sort of like built on home video. And it got really huge on home video. It was like one of the best-selling VHS
cult, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, it was like a kind of slow burning cult thing. So there was a lot of frustration from the studio at that point that they had messed up and that there was actually some audience for it. Yeah. So then they wanted to do a TV show, and I think Rick told them where they could stick it. And I have no idea if there's any relation from that to that 70s show. I don't know. It's possible.
Maybe.
Terrible show. Yeah, I just lucked out. And I mean, a lot of people can't stand me in that movie. So it's like not a surprise to me that, you know, I mean, like the kind of stuff that I'm interested in, and I think that the stuff that Linklater likes, we like, you know, kind of like twitchy, naturalistic acting that seems like, you know, somebody that you could like meet at a bus stop. After Days, I actually ended up kind of like doing a few more parts like through the 90s.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
Is that like something you want to do, acting?
I think I just wanted to not have to work in an office. You know, I mean, I definitely like over the year, I've always loved movies, but the movies that I love have never been like the movies that are coming out now.
Sure.
They've always been like weird, like character study and genre movies from the 70s. Or just like straight out exploitation. And what is basically exploitation now I find totally offensive for some reason. And I definitely didn't think that I was ever going to do like act again. I mean, it was kind of just a weird thing that I stumbled into. I'd actually done some TV when I was a little kid on PBS. That was sort of like another random fluke.
Oh, what was that?
It was an all improv drama starring only kids, where kids like played adults and had like tried to do this like soap opera thing, and it's like one of the most uncomfortable things you've ever tried to watch. It's fucking hilarious. I've got like this VHS tape that's like corroded and falling apart that's got some clips from it. That was the first thing I did. You know, I've been doing it for 20 years now, on and off. Like, I think I've just met so many people from going to like film festivals and stuff. I've kind of like slowly collected people that I actually like and like hanging out with, and who I don't think are like shitty megalomaniacal people, that whenever they're doing stuff, I'm super happy to help them out, but I would never want to try and do it as a career. And I had maybe like a year where I tried to do it as a career, and it was a mistake. Like, I think you get really used to seeing a certain type of like really stylized acting in movies, and it's like it's grating on some people's nerves to see other stuff. I think it's getting better now. I mean, like, especially with like it's weird. The rise in reality TV is kind of a really shitty thing in one way, but in another way, it's kind of changed what we're used to seeing, and not
like an aesthetic of like.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like dealing in this like idea of authenticity, because I mean, like, reality TV is just as fake as any totally fictional movie. But it's like that weird sort of like directed improv style acting, like we're kind of
loose script.
That we're used to seeing that now. So yeah, it's really sad that word mumblecore has like turned into such a death sentence for so many people. Yeah, I think it's pretty much viewed as like a negative thing. I'm pretty close with Andrew Brzezinski, who did kind of the movie that term got coined. I think it was actually his sound recordist who coined that term as just this like kind of funny thing, and then just through sort of like people that were having movies at South by Southwest at the time, I think it took off as this sort of like banner. And I don't think Andrew was really ever into it. I think he said last time somebody talked to him about it that it would probably be inscribed on his tombstone. But
King of Mumblecore.
Yeah, I don't think he's.
Godfather of Mumblecore.
I don't think he's into it. And I think I just did a movie with him called Computer Chess. I think it's pretty. It definitely. He's still very. It's super important for him to have like non-professional actors and stuff that he does, and he does that kind of like guided improv sort of style of directing. This is the first thing that he's ever edited in like Final Cut. He's always cut
16
film.
million, wow.
Yeah, everything that he's done before this was 16 millimeter that was cut on a flatbed. So.
I wouldn't have the guts to do that.
Yeah.
I'd be so scared of cutting something.
I don't think he knew any better. That was just like what, he was on the tail, he went to like Harvard Film School, which is like, Harvard's super well known for its film school. Yeah. But I think he was on the very tail end of like, he was like probably the last person to learn on this old equipment. I love making stuff. I love making stuff collaboratively, and I'm not scared of cameras, so I'll always act as long as anybody wants me to act and stuff, but I don't feel like I even deserve to make a living at it. But I mean, in the same breath, I don't know who does in this country anymore. I mean, most of the people that are picked to be in movies are models, not actors, Yeah. I feel like England has an exclusive domain over people who can actually act now. I worked at Apple for 4 years doing Final Cut Pro support, like Pro App support. So that was where I picked up a lot of the kind of post stuff and editing stuff that I know now. And that actually kind of snowballed into a lot of the stuff that I do now. Because when the acting stuff obviously never really paid the bills.
Yeah.
But I've always been involved in computers and graphics since I was a kid, and I sort of like started doing editing stuff, and then starting doing motion graphic stuff, and then like through just computer people that I knew, I met Bob Saviston, who was working on a really early version of what ended up being his animation software. It was just called Line Research back then. And I sort of like met him and was beta testing his software, and then kind of Rick independently met him through Tommy Pilata, who was in Slacker, and then that kind of like turned into Waking Life, and I actually ended up animating on that as well as being in it. Yeah, it did bad stuff to some people. I remember like after it came out, we had this really weird sort of like promotional like stuff that they had us do, and one of the things that we did was go to some like film appreciation club in New Jersey to show the movie, and it was all these like retired like senior citizens that were just so pissed, like they just ate us alive and were like, that made me sick, what was that, they didn't have a story. And I just kind of was like grinned and nodded my head and was just like, well, not every movie is for everybody. I've done video projection stuff for Octopus Project, and they've like very charitably called me the like 5th honorary member a few times, but I only like helped play music on stage with them once, and it was because they were playing a song from the soundtrack for the game Thunderbeam that I'm working on now. So they had me kind of just for fun, like get up and try and play a part. But yeah, Diagonals is the only like band that I was ever in. I do just like dumb noise on my own for fun. But I really don't like lugging equipment around. Dragging that amp around was a drag. I'm interested in pretty much anything that I've got like time to and energy left in me to do that's creative and a release from crappy day jobs.
What is your day job? You make websites?
Yeah, I do UI design. So I've been through a couple of companies in the last like 10 years, but I typically do a lot of human-computer interface stuff, which is a lot of like traditional web design and graphic design, and then also a lot of testing. So I've like been in a position where I like monitor people behind like a two-way mirror and do eye tracking so I can see where they're looking at on pages, and click heat maps and stuff. I'm not in a position where I'm doing that right now. When I worked for a bigger company before the company that I work for now, and I did that, and that was like fun in a kind of perverse way.
Oh wow!
And a lot of the UI stuff that I've sort of picked up in the last like 10 years doing that, which is this like weird. I don't even know how I got into the job that I'm in now, because I'm a high school dropout. Like I've got no business like doing it. It's just stuff that you like learn over the years. I'm like super obsessed with perception and quirks of perception, and computers are the best way to explore that. because I mean, like you can throw paint at a canvas and sort of make an assumption about what you're trying to do or what you're trying to accomplish, but you can like very exactingly procedurally generate something visually on a computer and say like, this was like, I had this idea that gravity was connected to time, and like here it is, this is what happens, you get braid, like. And then there's like also like you can do like interactive art can be super accessible through that sort of like modulation of putting it in a video game. You can get something super experimental and fucked up and abstract in front of a bunch of like tweens. That's pretty exciting to me. I feel like games have a problem too, because games, I mean, ever since the NES, like games have sort of like been dragging around all this baggage of being like a kid's toy. It's kind of like how long it took comics to sort of come out as like an art form, with like underground comics in the 60s through like sort of like Fantagraphics comics. Like games haven't quite gone through that transformation yet, where they get the capital A art people to like respect what they do. Or we have a indie game meetup called Wiggins Rancheros here in town. If you go to austinindies.com, we do a monthly indie game roundup on there. There's just tons of bizarre stuff coming out of like Canada and Northern Europe. And
what do you guys do there? Just kind of showcase like neat games that you find?
Yeah, we'll usually get together and we'll showcase one developer or one game that's something new and interesting. And then we'll also have like people locally who are making games come and be able to like show them off, kind of smaller scale on the floor, and let people play them as they get made. I'm super obsessed with it and being a part of it through like either like making my own games or curating stuff at Fantastic Arcade. Yeah, it's not really nostalgic for video games though. Well, the play is sort of nostalgic for old adventure games. Like if you ever played any of the old LucasArts games like Maniac Mansion or Monkey Island or any of that stuff, it'll be sort of like poking at and interacting with an environment. But the look of it is really more nostalgic to like 70s sci-fi like kids shows. Like old anime and stuff like Gatchaman. It's called Battle of the Planets here. Or there's this English show that we're like pretty directly doing an homage to called The Tomorrow People. It's all very tongue-in-cheek. Like one of the things that the game is about is this sort of like moral hypocrisy in like kids shows where you've got these sort of like pacifist utopian like good guys that are non-violent but like manage to defeat the bad guys in one way or another. So there's a lot of like in our game violence is a no-no, but you end up sort of passive aggressively making the bad guys kill one another. There's permadeath, so you end up getting a bunch of like bright-eyed innocent cadets killed sort of to advance your what you're trying to do in the game. Yeah, so permadeath is this idea in games that comes from, they're called roguelikes. They were these sort of dungeon crawlers that had no save and continue other than just like one point, the latest point that you played to. And if you died, you were dead. And they kind of gave the game some sort of like weight. You actually would get nervous getting into dangerous situations. As opposed to games now where you just like die and you churn and you go back and over and over again until you get through it. So we do that in that we've got an infinite number of randomly generated sort of teen cadets that when they die you just draft another one and the dead body remains where it was until you drag it out and dispose of it or whatever. The thing that's great about games is you can either do every little thing in the game, like script every little thing in the game to happen like you might in a movie, or you can sort of procedurally cause things to happen, which is to say, it's to say that you can like make a very simple rule, and then that a lot of complexity can come from a very simple rule. Like I can say, instead of saying like, hey, make this guy walk over to this thing, I can say, hey, make this guy attracted to this thing, and then like move this thing, and then instead of like plotting the course of each object, you just, stuff happens, and stuff that like you didn't necessarily expect all the time. So you get, when you hear people talk about like emergent behavior or like emergent complexity, that's what they're talking about, is like a simple system of rules that gives rise to this like very complex behavior. And that's something that I'm super obsessed with and fascinated with. You know, when you watch a movie, you feel like you have this sort of like connection with the person making the movie, but when you play a really good game, and a game that like gives some level of authorship to the person playing it, it's like the experience of not listening to music but playing music, and that's a really amazing experience that, you know, not everybody always gets to have.
I floated to your door.